This is from the Daily Mail. How Baton Rouge school, plagued by racial tensions and violence, drove military veteran to spearhead successful campaign for wealthy white residents to form new city of St. George. The first thing I'd like to do is insult the person who wrote that headline, because it's overly verbose and doesn't really explain what the story is. The story's massive. Baton Rouge is effectively splitting into two cities over crime, with the wealthier suburb, which is predominantly white, St. George, becoming its own city. And this was as of a couple days ago. The interesting thing is that there are many people arguing that by having this wealthy suburb break off, which is predominantly white, 70%, it is going to harm and leave behind black families. I am shocked that they would argue that make that racist argument. Black families in Baton Rouge don't need the white people to be there in order to succeed. I don't know why they would make that argument. But of course, they're claiming it's racist now that the people who live in this community voted for their own city. So what say you, panel?
Matt, how do you feel about this?
It's not racist. It's rational.
Is it based, in fact?
It's very based, and there's a movement. I don't know about Louisiana, but in Texas, there's a movement to create new free cities that split off from places like Austin. And it's simply about taxes. It's about regulations. It's about zoning. It's about schools. It's about all the things that normal people care about. And my guess is that the Baton Rouge city government is slightly better than Portland, Oregon, but maybe not good enough if you're paying the taxes. So why wouldn't you vote with your feet? And why wouldn't you start a community that is actually going to care about basics? Like, I want my trash picked up. I would love for my kids not to be transitioned in middle school, and I would love not to get shot.
Yeah. Baton Rouge is where there was a big BLM riot, and the case is still going on, where the police officer then sued the organizer for being like, you created a dangerous situation.
Wow.
There was a similar effort in Atlanta to create, I think it's called Buckhead. And as far as I know, it's been voted on a couple times. It's never gone through. But again, there was this criticism that it's like all the wealthy white residents want to split off. I think that's an oversimplification to scare people against the concept, right? If you're living in an area and you guys are doing pretty well, regardless of race, and you think, hey, this city is being mismanaged, I don't want to sell my house. My house is in the good part. Why don't we split off? That makes sense for me. I think that it's sort of arrogant of cities that are being poorly managed to say, well, like, you guys have to go down with our ship. You're not allowed to leave. Otherwise, we'll label you racist.
It's not race. It's governance. It's failure of governance. It's a failure to do the basic things that you expect a city government to do.
Yeah, I think so for sure.
I mean, the thing is, you can't, if they are wealthy people, you can't make them stay, right? Like, even if this failed and they were like, well, you can't. Well, all those people can be like, well, this sucks. We're leaving anyway.
Would you rather them move away, or would you rather them split off and live next door? I think the state would rather they stay in the state. To
the people of Baton Rouge, obviously, it's going to matter. But to the people that want to leave, it doesn't matter. You cannot force people to stay. And the more the state tries to, the more it resembles, what you get when the state tries to make people stay in an area. And that has plenty of historical analogs on all kinds of, different degrees, from marginally annoying to, they're going to throw you into mass graves if you try to leave. Right. So
I wonder if we'll see more and more of this. Again, I think you're right. It's happening in Texas. Like I said, the Atlanta one is the one I'm most familiar with, but if you can keep them there by labeling them, racist, if that sort of becomes less,
why would you want to live with racists?
Why would you want to live with racists? Yeah, they don't even want to be here. Let them go. But like, as this logic falls apart, do you think we'll see this more and more in cities that are sort of struggling?
I'm sure this was happening in Baton Rouge, but as cities start to destroy their tax base, they start to expand their boundaries and encroach into suburbs that weren't part of their tax base. So part of it is just like, it's like economic warfare. Like, you're not going to do that to us. We're going to separate from you completely. If they would get their house in order, they wouldn't have this problem.
Yeah.
You've got state of Jefferson, Greater Idaho.
Yeah.
You've got a county in Colorado trying to secede from the state. This is actually happening all over the country. And when there is no solution to the people who live there, when they're demanding these things, they don't get it, they move. And now we're seeing geographic hyperpolarization, which is really bad.
You
But you know what's going to happen now here in Baton Rouge, St. George? People who can afford to will move into the wealthy, safe, and secure area of St. George, and the poor people will stay behind, and Baton Rouge will start to fall apart.
And 90% of this is, well, no, the two issues, if I understand correctly, the two issues are the schools and also the crime. So like, and there's violence at schools. It really is like, if you have an unsafe area where there is no law, where the law enforcement does not take care of the population, the people with means leave that area. That's just the way it is. If you can get out of it, if it's dangerous, and it's whether it's the same as whether it's people that are leaving a town because they don't like the school, or refugees from a war-torn country. This is what happens when people are unsafe and they can leave. They get the hell out of Dodge. So this is not some kind of shock, and you're only going to see it. The actual solution is to get competent governance.
Yeah, you can't really hold order-minded people hostage by saying you have to stay here where there's chaos. They're not going to do it. They're going to follow their principles and their values, and they want structure, order, and safety.
I wonder if there's actually any kind of solution to the issue of self-segregation, because what I see from this is, if you don't allow a city like St. George, as we're all mentioning, people move, right? Yeah, well, these wealthy white people are going to go move into wealthy white neighborhoods. They're not going to decide to go move into like central Chicago. None of these wealthy families are going to be like, I know, 45th and the Red Line sounds good. They're not going to do it. They're not going to want to go there. So all that's going to keep happening is more and more self-segregation. But the thing is, I learned this growing up in Chicago. All of the races self-segregate by choice. No one forced them to do it. In the early days, there was something called redlining, which is where the real estate companies would intentionally push black families towards red line housing. They're like, we want to make them all go there because it's a racist housing market. They're concerned about the property values if black families move into white areas or close to them. So they wanted to control it. That gets made illegal. Guess what happens? Nothing changes. The Hispanic people start moving near Hispanic people. The white people move near white people. And the black people move to live in black communities. Now you've got St. George, but if they were forced to leave, none of those people are going to move to a Mexican neighborhood or a Honduran neighborhood. None of them are going to move to a black neighborhood. I mean, very rarely. Some may, but for the most part, they don't do it. People just segregate based on race. That I don't know what the proposed leftist solution to that is when people choose to do it.
Well, sometimes leftists propose segregating based on race. Like, I can't remember which school, but there was a college recently where the student, the African American student community was saying, "Well, we want our own dorm. We don't want to have to live with anyone else."
Yeah.
Like, so is that racist, or are we cool with that one? Like, what are we doing here, team?
The left likes it.
Yeah,
when they call for it, it's okay. But if you were to be like, "Hey, I'm not saying it's a race thing, but I don't want to live in a place where I'm scared to send my kids to school because they're going to get beat up and there's all kind of stuff," then you're racist.
To be fair, the left has no real morals and no real ideology. The best example being Lance from the Surfs on this show arguing that if a man is attracted to a manly woman, he's gay, but then tweeting out that men being attracted to manly women is straight, because it's literally flavor of the month for these people. They have no ideas behind anything they're saying.
For people that are making the argument that you were referring to, it's just a vector of attack. So that's why like Jordan Peterson was referred to it as postmodern, because it doesn't actually matter like to them. It's just that this is an attack that will convince people watching, and it's a vector of attack that will work. And so they don't really believe it. Like Tim says, it's not like they have any belief in it. What they actually believe is that words have power, and that's the postmodern thing. So they use race as an effective tool. It's nothing more than an effective tool. That's why it's conditional, and it's different depending on who's using it and stuff like that, because it's all that postmodern garbage.
It's also like this is a microcosm of our two different philosophies, if I'm grossly generalizing. One is centralization of power and one size fits all, and we're going to run the city the way that the ruling party believes in. And I think our side believes in localism. Like if everybody in the Mexican American community wants to self-gather in that community, I think that's great. But maybe they want to mix it up. Like, how do we know what a robust culture looks like unless we let people to be free enough to decide for themselves. What do they value most? Do they value being with people that look and sound like them? Or do they value diversity? Or do they just value a reasonable tax code that doesn't totally screw you?
Right. And I think we talk about this a lot, but I think one of the biggest challenges facing America right now is that we don't have a collective understanding of what our values are and what our culture is supposed to be. And so that's why I love regional culture in America. I think it's really interesting that in Louisiana, there's a big Cajun influence. It's just different language, and I would want to preserve those things. But overarching, do we understand what it means to be American as opposed to these regional enclaves? Or, if you're living within an immigrant community that's settled in a specific area, would you be able to both have your, ethnic culture and as well as be able to say but being American means this. These are the values that we all agree we want to preserve.
Well, we did have a system that allowed for individuality and local culture and a common sense of American identity. I think going back to centralization, intersectionality is a central plan, and it ranks everybody based on somebody's preferences. And it is so fundamentally un-American that it pushes us away from each other. It creates all of these divisions and this distrust amongst different types of Americans. And I think that's what's tearing us apart.
Yeah. I think intersectionality, this was the big buzzword I remember when I was going through college, how great is intersectionality? And as you're describing it, I'm like, this sounds awful. This sounds terrible. But it is, again, this idea that, we could have a moral and cultural understanding of what order should look like, but there's the opposite side, which says, no, we want to be able to change, to continuously rotate the deck as we see fit, and we don't want you to be able to complain about it without being labeled with an ism, so to speak.
Yes.
Thank you so much for agreeing with me.
Affirmation for Hannah Claire.
Thank you. I need that because I'm female and also I'm a middle child, so it's really important to my ego.
Middle child will do that, yeah.
Are you a middle child?
No.
Do you think birth order does make a difference in personality? I'm sorry, this is off topic, but
I don't know about in personality, but in the way that you're raised. If I was the first child, there would have been no second child.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.